When you stop being available, everything changes. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt like you were pouring from an empty cup? Saying yes when every cell in your body was quietly begging you to say no? Perhaps you've stayed in conversations, relationships, or roles long past the moment they served your growth, simply because being available felt like the right thing to do. Or maybe, like so many of us, you learned early on that love is earned through sacrifice, and presence means validation. But what happens when you stop showing up in places where your soul is shrinking? What shifts when you decide that your energy, your time, your presence is sacred, not a resource to be mined, but a force to be honored? Carl Jung, one of the founding voices of modern depth psychology, once said, "When you stop being available, everything changes." At first glance, it might sound like a self-help mantra, but beneath those 7 words lies a profound psychological truth, one that touches power, self-worth, identity, and the invisible threads that bind our relationships. This idea, the radical act of withdrawing availability, is not about selfishness. It is about sovereignty. It is about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that have been diluted by people-pleasing, societal roles, and unconscious survival patterns. And as we'll see, this theme is not new. Long before Jung gave it voice, it echoed through ancient myths, sacred texts, and the quiet revolutions of individuals who chose to walk away in order to come home to themselves. From the hermits of ancient Egypt to the Stoic philosophers of Greece, from Sufi mystics to modern psychologists, the journey inward, away from compulsive availability, has always been an initiation, a rite of passage that separates the pleaser from the seer, the rescuer from the self-knower. To stop being available in the way the world expects is to become available to something deeper, your essence, your vision, your truth. This conversation matters now more than ever. In an age of constant connectivity, where seen means obligated, and availability is conflated with worthiness, we are losing ourselves in the name of being there for everyone else. The consequence? Burnout, resentment, identity diffusion, disconnection from what truly matters. But there is another way, a more rooted, ancient, and empowered way of being. In this journey, we will explore how the simple act of withdrawing, not out of bitterness but out of self-respect, can transform the way we love, lead, create, and connect. We will walk through history, unravel the psychology, and most importantly, ask the real questions. Who am I when I stop being everything for everyone? What becomes possible when I choose presence over performance? And what if the life you seek begins the moment you stop being so readily available? Let's begin. The sacred act of withdrawing. A tale as old as time. To understand what it means to stop being available, we must first ask, what does it mean to be available? In our modern world, availability has come to mean constant access. Messages returned instantly, emotions made digestible for others, energy spent to smooth edges, fix problems, and fill voids, even when those voids aren't ours to fill. We live in an age where silence is suspicious and stillness is equated with absence. But this is a distortion, a far cry from how presence, absence, and boundaries were understood throughout history. In many ancient cultures, withdrawing was not seen as rejection. It was seen as revelation. In early Egyptian spirituality, the hermits of the desert fathers, and mothers, left the noise of society behind not to escape life, but to meet life more honestly. They chose seclusion not from arrogance, but from humility, recognizing that true wisdom requires silence, and the soul needs space to breathe. Their withdrawal became a form of sacred resistance to a world too loud for inner truth. In India, the concept of sannyasa, renunciation, is part of a 4-stage life journey. After fulfilling family and social duties, the seeker enters a phase of detachment, not as an act of selfishness, but as a return to their truest self. To stop being available to the material world is, in this context, to become available to the eternal. Even in the West, the Greek philosophers echoed this truth. Socrates often spoke of the need to turn inward. His student Plato wrote that the soul, when too entangled in the body's distractions and the world's noise, cannot remember its essence. The Stoics, too, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, taught that guarding one's time and mind was a moral duty, not a privilege. They saw every yes as a debt owed, and every no as an act of clarity. Jung, whose quote anchors this entire exploration, was deeply inspired by these ancient truths. His work on individuation, the process of becoming one's true self, is inherently about stepping back from unconscious roles and external validation. To individuate, Jung argued, a person must withdraw from their personas, the masks they wear to please or protect, and meet their shadow, their inner world, their unlived life. That process begins often with a quiet refusal, a refusal to be constantly available. Cultural reverberations, East and West, ancient and now. Let's go even deeper. In Japanese Zen, there's a concept called mu, emptiness or the void that is not barren but full of potential. To embrace mu is to step away from the performative self and into the essence of being. Monks train for years in silence, in retreat, in stillness. To not be available is to become more deeply alive. In Islamic Sufi tradition, the idea of khalwa, spiritual seclusion, is revered. The seeker withdraws not to hoard wisdom, but to dissolve the ego and become a clearer channel for divine truth. The 13th century mystic Rumi often wrote of how the soul, when quieted from the world's demands, hears the music of the universe. "Don't get lost in your pain," he wrote. "Know that one day your pain will become your cure." But this cure comes through stillness, solitude, and selective presence. In indigenous traditions across the Americas, rites of passage often included vision quests, time spent alone in nature, in silence with no distractions. These were not punishments or escapes, but initiations. It was understood that wisdom comes when the noise stops, when availability ends, and when one is finally present with the earth, the spirit, and the self. We can trace this theme in myth, too. Consider the story of the Greek goddess Hestia. Unlike other Olympians who sought power, glory, or drama, Hestia tended the hearth. She did not insert herself into every crisis or conquest. She remained centered. Her fire was the center of the home and temple, and it was said that as long as her flame burned, the city stood protected. Hestia teaches us that presence is power, but not everywhere, only where it's aligned. Or the archetype of the wise old man and the crone in folklore. They live on the edge of the village, withdrawn not from bitterness, but from wisdom. People seek them out when true knowledge is needed, not because they are always available, but because they are rarely available. Their value is in their intentionality. From historical to modern times. How the meaning changed. So what happened? Why, in our time, has availability become synonymous with goodness, and withdrawal viewed with suspicion? The shift began gradually, a byproduct of industrialization, then digitization. As machines ran 24/7, so did the expectation for humans. The spiritual value of rest was replaced by the economic value of productivity. In the age of the Internet, we are told, be online, be reachable, be responsive. If not, you're lazy, or rude, or worse, irrelevant. We've confused presence with performance. We've forgotten that absence, too, can be an act of love, to the self and to others. Carl Jung saw this change coming. In his writings from the early 20th century, he lamented the modern person's disconnection from their inner world. People will do anything, he wrote, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And one of the easiest ways to avoid the soul is to be constantly available to everyone else. But something ancient is stirring again. A quiet rebellion is underway. More and more people are recognizing the cost of their availability: chronic burnout, anxiety, a fractured sense of self. We're restarting to remember that saying no is not a betrayal, it is a boundary. That solitude is not a void, it's a source. And here's the paradox. When you stop being so available to others, you become more deeply available to life. To art, to truth, to purpose, to relationships that nourish instead of drain, to the sacred rhythm of your own becoming. The hidden cost of being always available. What modern psychology reveals. There's something strangely addictive about being needed. When someone reaches out and you answer immediately, when you smooth over a tense moment, when your phone lights up and you're there, it creates a momentary hit of validation, a chemical confirmation. I matter. You're rewarded with dopamine, the brain's favorite motivational currency. And in a world where visibility often equals value, being constantly on can feel like survival. But let's go deeper. At the psychological core of this compulsion to be available lies something far more profound and far more dangerous: our attachment system. Attachment theory. The need to be needed. From infancy, we're wired to connect. Our earliest bonds shape how we relate to others and to ourselves. If those bonds are inconsistent or conditional, we learn early that love may come at the cost of our own boundaries. Psychologist John Bowlby, who pioneered attachment theory, described how children who experience anxious or avoidant caregiving grow into adults who often overextend themselves to maintain connection. They fear being seen as too much or not enough, so they make themselves constantly available, emotionally, physically, energetically, in hopes of keeping love near. Being available becomes a strategy, a shield, a silent plea. If I am always there for you, maybe you won't leave me. It's no coincidence that many people who burn out or feel emotionally depleted are also highly empathetic, intuitive, or sensitive. Those who grew up attuned to others' needs because their own were overlooked. But here's the paradox. The more available you are to everyone else, the less you are to yourself. And over time, your sense of self begins to erode. The persona and the shadow. Carl Jung's archetypes at work. Carl Jung would call this the work of the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society. It's the version of ourselves we perform, the good friend, the reliable worker, the selfless partner. The persona isn't inherently false, but it's incomplete. It hides the messy, powerful, sometimes contradictory parts of us that Jung called the shadow. And when we over-identify with our persona, we forget we are more than the roles we play. Here is the truth. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you feed the persona and starve the shadow. And the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits. It shows up in resentment, fatigue, passive aggression, anxiety, and even physical illness. It whispers, "This isn't sustainable." It asks, "Who are you really doing this for?" The act of withdrawing, of stepping back, of becoming less available, is not rejection. It's integration. It's inviting the shadow into the light, saying, "You, too, belong." Jung believed individuation. The process of becoming whole required this kind of inner confrontation. To become who we are meant to be, we must face the parts of us we've exiled in order to be liked or accepted. It means risking disapproval. It means learning to sit with discomfort. It means becoming unavailable, not to punish others, but to finally meet ourselves. People-pleasing and the nervous system. Let's look at the nervous system. When you grew up in an environment where saying no wasn't any safe, emotionally or physically, your body remembers. Even as an adult, setting boundaries can trigger a fight-or-flight response. Saying, "I need space," might cause your heart to race, your palms to sweat, your throat to close. It's not weakness, it's biology. Dr. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory helps explain this. Our nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of safety. If we perceive withdrawal as rejection, based on past experience, our body may panic, even if the situation is safe. We stay available not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of abandonment, of not belonging, of being misunderstood. This is why so many people struggle to step back, even when they're overwhelmed. The body keeps score, as trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk writes, but the body can also learn new scores. When we begin to slowly withdraw from unhealthy patterns of availability, we rewire the nervous system. We teach ourselves that we are safe even when we are not needed, that we are worthy even when we are not performing. And over time, a miracle occurs. Inner calm replaces outer chaos. Fawning, the fourth trauma response. Most people have heard of fight, flight, or freeze, but there's a fourth trauma response often overlooked. Fawn. Fawning is the compulsion to appease, to please, to merge with others' needs as a survival tactic. It's deeply tied to codependency and self-abandonment. People who fawn become so hyper-focused on keeping others happy that they forget how to discern their own desires. Fawn types make themselves endlessly available. Emotionally, logistically, physically. They answer texts at midnight, overcommit, avoid conflict, and constantly scan for signs of disapproval. The cure? Conscious unavailability. Learning to tolerate disapproval. Learning to say, I care about you, but I also care about me. Learning that withdrawal is not betrayal, it's balance. Emotional labor and gender dynamics. Let's not ignore the socialized layers, especially when it comes to gender. Historically, women and feminine-identified individuals have been conditioned to be emotionally available at all times, as nurturers, helpers, listeners, fixers. This emotional labor often goes unseen and unrewarded. It's not just about presence, it's about performative care, smiling even when exhausted, apologizing for setting boundaries. The pressure to be always there is not just psychological, it's cultural, it's systemic. And breaking free from it often involves not just personal healing, but collective redefinition of what worth and value look like. To stop being available, for many, is a radical act. Sufi wisdom, saying no from the soul. In Sufi philosophy, the path to union with the divine is inward. Rumi wrote, "Close both eyes to see with the other eye. This other eye is not distracted by the world's demands. It listens deeply. It discerns." The Sufis teach that presence is a sacred act. It must be given consciously. To be always available is to leak spiritual energy. To be discerning with your presence is to honor its divinity. In this way, saying no becomes not just a psychological skill, but a spiritual practice. Pause for thought. When was the last time you said yes but meant no? What would it feel like, in your body, to become unavailable just long enough to hear your own truth? The slow disappearance of the self. There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when you realize you've crossed a line. You've given too much. You said yes again when your body begged for no. You smiled through the tension, made yourself small so others could feel big, held space for everyone but yourself. And afterward, something within you feels gone. This is not dramatic. It's not loud. It's a slow erosion. A dissolving of boundaries so gradual you barely notice until you look around and wonder, whose life am I living? When you're always available, you begin to disappear. 1. The emotional toll. Burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Let's begin with what many people carry daily but cannot name: chronic emotional exhaustion. This is not simply being tired, it's soul fatigue. The weariness that comes from being everything to everyone. You begin to resent the very people you love. Not because they are bad, but because you never paused long enough to remember your own edges. Resentment in this case is not a flaw. It's a signal, a flare from the unconscious saying, "Your boundaries have been breached." Dr. Gabor Mate writes that when we say yes to others but no to ourselves, we invite disease. And he means this literally. Immune disorders, chronic fatigue, even cancer have been linked to patterns of self-suppression. The body keeps track of every time you silence yourself. Over time, chronic availability leads to emotional dysregulation. You become irritable, anxious, numb, or emotionally volatile, not because you are unstable, but because you are overextended. 2. Identity dissolution, the good person. Trap. We are taught, often subtly, that being available means being good, that the good mother, good friend, good employee, or good partner is the one who never says no, who is always reachable, always agreeable, always tuned in. But what happens when the pursuit of goodness becomes self-erasure? You stop asking what you want. You lose the language of desire. You confuse kindness with compliance, generosity with self-neglect. You become an echo of others' needs rather than a voice of your own truth. Carl Jung warned about this deeply. He wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Why terrifying? Because it often means disappointing others. It means no longer being the version of you they want, and becoming who you truly are instead. The cost of not doing this? A fractured identity, a life half-lived, a quiet mourning for the self you never gave time to emerge. 3. Relationships become performances, not connections. Let's be honest. Relationships suffer when we're always available. Not flourish, suffer. Because when you are always emotionally accessible, always rescuing, always listening without being heard, a strange imbalance forms. You become a utility, a convenience. People begin to expect your energy without earning it, and soon they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a resource. True intimacy requires mutual presence, not performance. When one person is constantly giving and the other is constantly receiving, resentment builds beneath the surface like water behind a dam. Eventually, it breaks. Sometimes quietly, a silent withdrawal, sometimes explosively, a dramatic end. And here's the twist. When you finally start setting boundaries, the people who benefited from your lack of them will often accuse you of changing, of being selfish, of not caring. But this is a necessary grief, a shedding of roles that were never yours to play forever. 4. Career consequences, burnout culture, and the martyr myth. In the professional world, constant availability is often rewarded with praise, promotions, and prestige. The person who answers emails at midnight, the one who goes above and beyond, the one who never takes a day off. But at what cost? The World Health Organization now recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon, characterized by chronic workplace stress not successfully managed. It's not just about being tired, it's about being disconnected from meaning, from joy, from purpose. In her research on workplace emotional labor, psychologist Christina Maslach found that employees who don ET have clear personal boundaries, or who feel guilty for taking breaks, are at the highest risk for burnout. Yet we often idolize them. The work martyr, the grinder, the hustler. We post about them. We quote them. We become them. But in doing so, we perpetuate a dangerous myth, that our worth is tied to how endlessly we serve. In truth, the most impactful leaders are not constantly available. They're deeply intentional. They know when to step in and when to step away. They protect their energy because they understand that vision requires space. 5. The intergenerational pattern. What we teach by example. Children don't just learn from what we say, they learn from what we model. If you're always overgiving, always putting yourself last, always sacrificing, They will learn that this is what love looks like, that to be loved is to be drained, that to be worthy is to disappear, and so the pattern continues. But when a parent says, "I'm resting right now," or "I'm not available for that conversation, but I love you," they're not being selfish. They're showing that love has boundaries, that presence is meaningful when it's chosen, not coerced. When we stop being always available, we break the pattern. We teach the next generation that self-respect is not abandonment, it's integrity. Historical echoes. When the center cannot hold, throughout history, we've seen the consequences of overextension on a larger scale, too. Empires fell not just from external attacks, but from internal fatigue. Leaders who tried to hold everything, control everything, be everywhere, crumbled under the weight of their own endless availability. From Rome to the Ottoman court to the late days of European colonialism, those who overreached eventually unraveled. Even myth tells this tale. Prometheus gave fire to humanity, an act of radical availability, and was punished for eternity. His sacrifice became his imprisonment. Narcissus gave everything to the reflection, the outward world, and perished from neglect of his inner life. The message is clear. Without boundaries, even the most powerful collapse. Pause for reflection. What parts of your life feel most performative right now? Where have you mistaken being always there for being deeply connected, becoming deliberately unavailable? The inner work of returning to yourself. So far, we've explored the psychological roots of compulsive availability, its emotional consequences, historical echoes, and the subtle erosion of self it causes. But understanding isn't enough. Healing requires practice. To stop being always available is not just an external shift. It's a deep, inner reorientation, a quiet revolution, 1,000 small acts of self-return. Let's begin with what matters most, your nervous system. 1. Regulate first, creating inner safety. You can't set boundaries if your body doesn't feel safe. Before you start saying no, before you begin withdrawing from unhealthy patterns, your nervous system needs to be stabilized. Otherwise, every boundary will feel like a threat, not a healing act. Start here. Box breathing, used by Navy SEALs. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Repeat for 2 to 3 minutes. This technique calms the vagus nerve and brings your body into a state of safety. Hand on heart self-soothing. Place one hand on your chest, the other on your belly. Breathe slowly. Say softly, "I am safe. I am allowed to rest. I do not have to earn love." Journaling. Prompt. Where do I feel most overextended? What would it feel like to pause, even for 1 hour? These small practices shift your baseline state from threat to trust, and that changes everything. 2. Micro boundaries. Start smaller than you think. Most people imagine setting boundaries as grand, dramatic moments. Big speeches, slamming phones down, bold exits. But real transformation begins with micro boundaries. Small, doable shifts that reteach your system how to choose itself. Examples. Not replying immediately to a non-urgent message. Saying, "Let me get back to you," instead of automatically agreeing. Taking a 5-minute break before jumping into the next task. Letting calls go to voicemail without guilt. Each time you pause, each time you delay a reflexive yes, you are rewiring a lifelong pattern. You are choosing conscious presence over compulsive response, and slowly that reclaims your time and your truth. 3. Sacred withdrawal. Practicing the art of deliberate absence. Availability is not just about physical presence. It's about energetic entanglement. Sometimes you're still answering messages in your mind, still spinning in someone else's emotional storm, still reliving a conversation hours later. This is where the practice of sacred withdrawal comes in. Inspired by spiritual traditions like Sufism, Buddhism, and Christian monasticism, this is the art of conscious retreat. Not to escape life, but to return to it with clarity. Try this. The 1-hour rule. Each day, take 1 hour with no input. No phone, no conversation, no music, no productivity. Just breath, body, silence. Let your mind declutter. Let your presence recalibrate. Weekly digital Sabbath. Choose one day or even one evening each week to log off. Fully. Turn off notifications. Let others know in advance. Be unreachable, unapologetically. Journal prompt. Who am I when no one needs me? This kind of absence is presence. It clears space for your inner voice to return, and it reminds others, gently but firmly, that your time is not a public utility. 4. Boundaries as compassion, not rejection. One of the most powerful shifts in boundary work is changing how we frame it. Setting limits isn't about pushing people away. It's about preserving the energy that allows you to love and give sustainably. Boundaries are a form of compassion, for yourself and for others. Try saying, I want to give you my full attention, and I can't do that right now. I'm stepping back because I care about this relationship, and I want to be present, not resentful. I need rest so I can return with clarity. Language matters. It doesn't have to be harsh. It can be honest and kind. And if someone reacts poorly to your boundary, that doesn't mean it's wrong. That means it's working. 5. Ancient wisdom. From Stoicism to Sufism. Let's ground this in deeper traditions. Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, taught that we should distinguish between what is within our control and what is not. Availability to everything, every emotion, every request, every social cue, is a recipe for emotional chaos. A Stoic would ask, is this mine to carry? Sufism teaches that your attention is sacred. To scatter it carelessly is to dishonor the divine spark within. As Rumi said, don't get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure. Taoism reminds us of the strength in yielding, in quietness, in non-resistance. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu wrote, care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. You do not need to renounce the world, but you must learn to be of the world without being consumed by it. 6. Identity rebuilding, discovering who you are. Outside of service. When you stop being always available, a strange thing happens. You feel lost, confused, empty even. That's normal, because who are you when you're not the fixer, not the rescuer, not the one who always says yes? This is the space for rebirth. Use it. Try new things that have nothing to do with being useful. Paint, wander, daydream, make something ugly and unnecessary. Let your joy be selfish. Revisit parts of yourself that were shelved. The child who loved books, the teenager who wanted to sing, the adult who dreamed of more than checking boxes. Ask daily, what would I do today if no one expected anything from me? Over time, your identity will shift from being defined by what you give others to being grounded in who you are when you are finally whole. 7. The long view. This is a practice, not a performance. This work is not linear. You will relapse. You'll say yes when you meant no. You'll feel guilty. You'll over-explain. That's okay. Boundaries are like muscles. They strengthen with use, rest, and compassion. This isn't about becoming emotionally unavailable, cold, or distant. It's about becoming deliberate, with your time, your energy, your heart. You are allowed to be unavailable. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to choose. Because in the space where availability ends, sovereignty begins. Pause for reflection. What one small boundary could you practice this week? Not perfectly, but gently. Who would you become if your presence was no longer assumed but offered with intention? The sacred act of becoming unavailable. Somewhere along the path of growing up, in the quiet corners of classrooms, the expectations of parents, the need to belong, to succeed, to be loved, many of us inherited a dangerous myth. That to matter, we must always be reachable. That our availability is our value. That to pull back is to reject, to rest is to fail, to say no is to betray. But now, after everything we've explored, from the slow burn of burnout to the psychological mechanics of overfunctioning, from ancient teachings to modern boundaries, we know this isn't the truth. It never was. Because when you stop being always available, you don't become selfish. You become visible. You begin to reappear in your own life as a full, sovereign being, with needs, with rhythms, with sacred space around your presence. You begin to remember what you once buried, your joy, your pace, your longing, your inner compass. You shift from being a mirror for others to being a light for yourself, and something extraordinary happens. What changes when you withdraw with love? You start to notice who respects your time, and who only noticed you when they needed something. You realize which relationships were mutual and which were silently draining. You find that your creativity returns, your peace, your sleep, your clarity. You no longer perform your worth. You live it. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you cannot become if you are endlessly entangled in becoming what everyone else needs. Your absence becomes its own kind of message, not a punishment, not a test, but a quiet, powerful announcement. I am no longer sacrificing myself to be understood. I am no longer trading peace for proximity. I am here, but I am no longer everywhere. The echo through time. This shift is not new. The mystics withdrew to the mountains. The prophets fled to deserts. The poets wrote in solitude. The great minds, Jung, Rumi, Simone Weil, Thoreau, all spoke of the need to retreat in order to return. Stronger, clearer, undistracted by the noise of the crowd. Even in myth, the hero's journey begins with separation. It is only in stepping away from the world that we find the wisdom to return to it, not as imitators, but as authors. In every age, the path of selfhood has required withdrawal, and in every age the world resisted it, because the world profits off your availability, your constant engagement, your perpetual agreement. But you are not here to be consumed. You are here to create, to live, to love, to lead, to rest, to dream. You were never meant to be a 24-hour soul in a world built for transactions. What if you chose yourself, consistently? So let me ask you, not rhetorically, but as an invitation. What would your life feel like if you chose yourself not once, but consistently? What would change if your no was not a rejection, but a direction, a compass point toward what truly matters? How would it feel to be deeply, joyfully, unapologetically unavailable? Not to everyone, but to noise, to performance, to the expectations that shrink your soul. This isn't about isolation. It's about integration. You're not withdrawing to disappear. You're withdrawing to reclaim. So when you return to your work, your relationships, your world, you do so as your whole self, not diluted, not fragmented, but rooted in your own rhythms, your own pace, your own breath. You are allowed. You are allowed to silence the phone and listen to your thoughts. You are allowed to walk away from conversations that don't honor your presence. You are allowed to rest without explaining why. You are allowed to hold your energy like sacred currency, because it is. You are allowed to change, and when you do, everything else changes too. Final reflection. Let this be the question that stays with you as you walk back into the noise. Who am I when I stop being available for everything that isn't meant for me? Because in that space, in that stillness, in that soft and sovereign silence, you will meet someone you've been waiting for. Yourself. Take a breath. Seriously. Just pause right here and take one full conscious breath. Let it land. Because if this conversation stirred something in you, a quiet knowing, a deep remembering, then maybe you're not just watching a video. Maybe you're coming home to yourself. Here in this space, we don't chase surface-level answers or fast fixes. We go deeper. We explore where psychology meets soul, where history echoes in the present, and where ancient wisdom becomes personal power. Because the truth is, you were never meant to live on autopilot. You were meant to lead yourself, with clarity, with courage, with care. So if this resonated with you, if something inside you whispered yes, then I invite you to stay, to subscribe, to walk this path with us. Not because we have all the answers, but because we're asking better questions, together. Here, we honor boundaries as sacred. We reclaim time not as productivity, but as presence. We explore the quiet art of becoming unavailable, not to escape life, but to fully inhabit it. And we do it with kindness, with intention, with reverence. This is not a space for noise. It's a space for noticing, for remembering, for choosing. So, if you're ready to live with more meaning, more depth, and more emotional integrity, if you're tired of performing and ready to start becoming, then hit subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a new chapter of your own growth. Because the journey inward, it's the most powerful one you'll ever take, and we're walking it together. Welcome home.